concluded our business just after 1 o'clock on the Friday the 31st. And I got a ride, and Prime Minister Keith Mitchell went with me to the meeting at the Hyatt with the West Indies Cricket Board and representatives of what I call the India 14, those who had gone to India, the 14 players. And you know that there are certain agreements which were arrived at and the way to go forward. I've been taking a great deal of interest in this matter, and I want to clarify a few things about our role here from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. First of all, there are persons who say, what is Ralph doing involving himself in this? He doesn't have enough work in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In the same way that I take on the matter of Clico and Bico, and I will say something about that shortly. If we are within a regional movement, regional leaders have to take on national leaders have to take on regional responsibilities. And I will just say to you what are the impulses that got me going. The West Indies left, the tour was terminated. The game played on the 16th of October, the last game which they played. It wasn't the last in the 5-match series. They had another one to play in terms of the 1 days, and then they had test matches and T20 games. There was a premature termination. I am not going to get involved as to who is to blame or who not to blame, and I'll come to that shortly. I'm interested in a solution. 1 week passed. Nobody said or did anything in the region. Unfortunately, at this time, the chairman of CARICOM was out of the region in a different time zone, doing work for his country. The other person who's on the bureau of CARICOM, there are 3 of us on the bureau, the current chairman, the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda. I am the outgoing chairman, so I'm on the bureau. And then the incoming chairman is the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, and I think most persons would concede that as far as Bahamas is concerned, cricket could be a word written in upside down Chinese. They don't have a sensitivity to it, and they're away from it. And the other leader in the region, and I have to assess what is at hand, who has a commitment to seeing something done, is the Prime Minister of Grenada, Dr. Keith Mitchell, who was also out of the region in a different time zone. So a senior leader had to do something, and a man who is on the bureau, and in any case, a person who had been involved in helping centrally to settle the problem between Chris Gale and the West Indies board about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And that was a successful venture. So I understand the issues, and I love cricket. But apart from my personal love of cricket, let's get it clear. Cricket is existential to the spirit of our Caribbean civilization. And this is a game which goes beyond the boundary. It is more than just what is played on the field of play. So I wrote a letter on October the 23rd to the president of the WICB, Mr. Dave Cameron. Understand this, people underestimate what cricket has done, not only for the people of the Caribbean, in terms of we ourselves internally, and the cohesion that it adds to us, and the joy which it gives us, and the the sense of worth, self-worth. That's why so many of us stay up in the middle of the night to listen to games. And we get frustrated and angry, but we keep going back as though we are addicted. Particularly in these days, addicted to punishment. Because we lose so much often now than we used to. I don't know how many of you have looked at this. I've spoken about it before. There are 4 regions or countries in the world which have dominated sport from time immemorial, and certainly for over the last 100 years. For more than 15 years. Domination for more than 15 years. What are these countries or regions? The region of East Africa, in particular Kenya and Ethiopia, in long distance running. Amateur boxing. Cuba dominated it at the Olympics for more than 15 years. The same thing with ice hockey. The Soviet Union stroke Russia. And cricket. The West Indies. Look at the company which we are in. This is a country, this is a region of 5 million people. At the time when we dominated cricket, India had a population of over 800 million plus. They're now 1.2, 1.3 billion. England, the United Kingdom, the mother country for cricket, 65 million people. Pakistan and Bangladesh together, 400 million people. Then Australia, New Zealand. I mean, and a region of 5 million people in a collective activity, albeit in the field of sports. This is a phenomenal achievement in the way that 10 million people dominated world boxing, amateur boxing. That is to say Cuba. The countries which have, the other places I've mentioned. Ethiopia is 80 million people. Kenya is 30-odd million people. Russia is about 125 million people, but the Soviet Union was over 300 million people. This is the context. So how can a leader who is experienced doesn't take all of this context into account? It's only somebody who has a narrow chauvinist perspective and who cares not what happens to West Indies cricket. Well, I can't do that. And I know the people who are nationals of St. Vincent and Grenadines at home and abroad. In their frustration, they may say, some of them, what Ralph's doing with that? I'll leave the man and let him mash up the thing. But they will talk like that loosely by a tavern when they're having a sunset strong. But they really don't mean that. Because deep in them, they say, well, Ralph, the next day they will say, well, Ralph, why Ralph didn't do something about this thing? So I had to do something about it. And we start to move. And I want to tell you, without going into the details, I have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to see if we can bring about a solution. In fact, I have a letter which is going off, a draft letter to CARICOM this morning to the Secretary General. I want the Secretary General to send this letter to the BCCI, the Board of Control for Cricket in India. to address the question of the $41.97 million claim. And I'm submitting in that letter what I call a grand settlement to be put to the BCCI. And the grand settlement contains the following elements. First, that the West Indies Cricket Board settles the internal matter with the India 14. All what we agreed at Hyatt Hotel in Port of Spain on the evening of the 30th of October. I don't have to go through the details there, but settle that first. Secondly, also something which came out of the Hyatt meeting for WIPA, the West Indies Players Association, and the India 14 to stop their internecine squabbling and get back on track as one entity in WIPA. Thirdly, for firm, urgent, practical steps to be taken in the reform of the management and administrative systems of the West Indies, the Cricket Board. The West Indies Cricket Board at the moment is functioning as if it were a private club. It needs to be responsible and responsive to the community. These are issues which had been raised in the Patterson report several years ago, and that's a starting point for the reform. Otherwise, this thing is going to happen again. I'm not making any criticism here about any individual leader currently inside of the WICB. I think it is clear to everybody that the structures which exist are not appropriate for the administration and management of West Indies cricket. They have to be responsible and responsive to the community. WICB doesn't own any cricket ground. WICB doesn't own West Indies cricket. The people of the region own it. They are custodians with their links to the ICC to organize cricket at a regional level and an international level. They are national associations. But the structure which exists is inadequate for these times and these circumstances. So that is the third point, and we have to begin taking practical steps and use the Patterson report as a starting point. Fourthly, the West Indies Cricket Board and the BCCI of India must work more closely and collaboratively in the interest of both Indian and West Indian cricket, and of course for world cricket. And there are many practical things which we can do together. And once we have those, as the lawyers would say, in those premises, given those 4 points, the fifth point is that India, in the interest of India, the interest of cricket in India and the Caribbean and world cricket, that they simply forego the claim in the light of what I call this grand settlement. Now, I don't know whether CARICOM, I'm having the letter copied to the members of the Bureau, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda is the chairman. The draft copied to the Prime Minister in the Bahamas and also to Prime Minister Mitchell. And once that letter is, we settle on something, and time is of the essence, because on Friday of this week would be the 15th day after the letter from the BCCI to the West Indies Cricket Board on making the demand. That letter was the 31st of October. I know that Dave Cameron has sent a letter to the BCCI on the 7th. And I am privy to the contents of that letter, which I'm not going to talk about. But Cameron himself had said at the meeting at the Hyatt in Port of Spain on the 31st of October, and to the press at the conclusion of the meeting, that he wants the help of CARICOM in approaching the BCCI and the Indian authorities generally to see if the matter can be resolved. Now, when I said that I'll be working to help with a resolution, that's for some strange reason that metamorphosed, that I will take money from the Treasury of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and ask other countries to do so. I explicitly said no, that is not on the cards. But, you know, because Ralph got involved and he's playing a leading role in this matter, that what you have to do is to tarnish his role by going to an absurd position. And the strange thing, to sell that to the region where some news agencies actually believe that I said so when I never said so. And this is the problem. And people have to listen to what you say carefully and don't allow propagandists to make the news for you. And when they talk their foolishness, it is the duty of editors, whether it's a blogger, whether it's a newspaper, to say, no, this is not what the man said. Anyway, in a sense, that's tangential, because what I want to see is a solution. I'm proposing a working group of CARICOM. I don't have to be part of the working group, you know. I will help in whatever way in which I can. But you know me already. You know I would have been, once I get involved, I'm in touch with a number of people regionally and globally on this matter. And I'm in touch with people who are intimately connected with this matter outside of the Caribbean, in addition to inside of the Caribbean. And I have a clear idea as to what can be done towards a settlement, but I have conceptualized it as a grand settlement for us to go forward with this, because you have to have a framework to get it solved. Now, other persons may have other ideas, but I put mine in the mix. And while other people are talking loosely, I'm putting pen to paper, and I'm keeping in touch with people and try to have this matter opened for a resolution.